Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Amazon Seller Podcast. We're doing a special YouTube Live edition. We're actually going to start trying to do this every week. Once we get a regular set scheduled time down, we will make sure that we get it. And I'm getting a little bit of an echo here, guys. Let me know if you can hear it good.
You sound good.
All right, cool. So I think it's just me, and I think just need to close down a screen here, and now it's good. All right, awesome. So yeah, we're going to be doing these YouTube Live of the Amazon Seller Podcast on a weekly basis going forward, best that we can. Once we get a set schedule down, we will let you know what that time is going to be every week. And if you're listening to this on the podcast audio version, like most people normally do, you can go to amazingfreedom.com/YouTube to subscribe to our channel so that you can catch future live episodes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to amazingfreedom.com/podcast to check out our podcast audio version. Maybe if you do a lot of driving, or if you like to listen to podcasts during your workouts, or while you just have free time doing some research or packing boxes, whatever it is, you can check out either the audio or the video version at one of those sources. So today we're going to be talking about how to reduce costs and maximize your profits in your Amazon private label business. And really those kind of go hand in hand, right? Obviously, if you're reducing your costs, you're going to be able to maximize your profits in a way that someone who's not reducing their costs in a smart way isn't going to be able to match you, right? And that's really what it comes down to. Not only are you going to maximize your profits, but you're going to potentially be able to beat out your competition who is not maximizing their profits and reducing their costs and just unable to compete because their margins end up being too thin and they either go out of business or it just doesn't make sense for them to continue selling that SKU. So we have a number of tips that we're going to go over today. Now that all three of us have been selling for a number of years, there's a number of costs that build up. We'll talk about software costs and just a lot of flat costs that kind of get added as layers to your business and to specific SKUs that you're launching. The three of us have experienced that, and we'll talk about strategies for reducing those costs, and something that Andy, you really have talked about for years now, especially for those who are just getting started, how to bootstrap in your business. And if you're joining us live today, I just want to say that you can leave a comment, drop a comment there, ask us a question. If it's related to this episode, we'll do our best to answer it. Andy, why don't you start off talking about some of the bootstrapping techniques that you've talked about for years now, and why you think it's so important for a new seller, especially, to be really aware of the expenses that can build up in their business.
Sure. So, it's key to always keep track of your numbers from the very beginning. A lot of people, they'll make they make the mistake of acquiring inventory, and the business kind of becomes a machine. They lose track of their numbers, and which is ultimately going to lead to failure. And so you have to be very aware of what your numbers are at all times. The great thing about Amazon business is you can scale up. And so, if you don't have a lot of capital when you start and you have more time, you can actually spend more time sourcing profitable inventory. And so that your purchases are going to bring you back a better ROI. And so, some of those ways that you do that, some of the ways that I did it when I first started, I started I started purchasing at thrift stores, and the inventory there obviously is very low, very cheap, and a lot of times you can get new items at the thrift stores. Because when I started, I didn't have a lot of capital, and so I just had to build my way up slowly. Basically, month over month, I continued to add revenue to my Amazon seller account. So that's one way that you can do it, and it's a totally different story if you have capital. If you're starting out with a large amount of capital, then you can scale up a lot faster. But if you're just beginning, you want to bootstrap. You want to be careful about the number of services that you subscribe to. You don't want to oversubscribe to services that you don't need, when you're just starting out. Like somebody asked me the other day, they were just starting out, and they asked me if they needed a certain service. And I said, no, you don't. You really don't need that. Maybe when you hit $100,000 in sales, that's when you can start adding another service. So those are two things that I advise is, again, one, if you don't have capital, then, and you have more time, then just spend that time sourcing more profitable inventory. And the second one is just be careful about the number of services you subscribe to when you're just getting started.
Awesome. So it really comes down to the amount of capital that you have versus your time, really, and the value of your time. Liran, something that you've talked about before on the podcast, and I know in our inner circle group, you've said this often, is that when you start off and you don't have as much capital, but you have lots of time, you're okay doing those kind of like $10 to $20 an hour jobs, right? You used to get all of your inventory delivered to your house, and you packed and prepped it in your basement, right? And eventually you hired someone else to do it. But what you kind of have grown into is focusing on those jobs or tasks that make you $100, $500, $1,000 an hour, right? Maybe you can go over that and what you think kind of is a mindset that a seller can have as they progress through their, maybe just from getting started to kind of growing. What are kind of that mindset and those different tasks, dollar amount levels?
Right. So, I think you want to ultimately have a good vision for where you want your business to go. And, like you said, it doesn't necessarily need to start with, depending on how much capital you have, it doesn't need to start with you outsourcing everything in your business. If you're starting out with, less capital that you're looking to maximize for inventory, like Andy said. So, but if you've kind of put your vision out of what does your business look like when you get to X dollars a month, and then what does it look like when you increase that, let's say after 6 months or a year in the business, you really do want to be outsourcing all the tasks, or not doing yourself, all the tasks that are that you can outsource out for $10, $15, $20, $30 an hour, and have start to build out, either VAs or a team, or outsource to a variety of services that can do those things for you. So, easy thing that one of the first things I did was I started sending my products to a prep center instead of sending all my products to myself, right, to prep. Then after started using sending products direct to Amazon from China, and now I'm using a third-party warehouse, which we could talk about more on what's the benefit of doing that. But now I don't do any of that, prepping and shipping, labeling products, any of those tasks that are easily outsourced to anybody. Even when I first started out, before I was living in a house, I was doing the prepping, packing myself out of my apartment. And then when I moved into a house, I had 4 college kids come over and do the prepping in my house. So I started to kind of outsource, and then eventually just got it all out of my house and outsourced in a better way. But you want to look to what's ultimately the vision of the business, which is for you to focus on your next sort of big breakthrough, as opposed to focusing on the sort of day-to-day, $10 to $20 an hour tasks.
Liran, let me ask you this. So I think a lot of our listeners do other forms of selling on Amazon, maybe arbitrage or thrifting, like Andy mentioned, and a lot of them still do the packing themselves. Or even when it comes to private label, like you just said, you first had it sent to your house. And obviously that reduced the cost of a prep center or hiring an employee to help you with that, right? Or contracting it out. But what's that level? What's the level if someone's looking to grow? I think most people wait too long, but we're talking about reducing costs. So how did you kind of figure in your head, like I'm actually spending more money by not outsourcing this task?
Yeah.
And what should, our listeners kind of be thinking in their head when they should make that transition?
I think once you have like cash flow coming in from the business, and you're able to, turn a profit, right? Then you have an Amazon payout. You should be looking to how best you can utilize those funds to invest back into the growth of your business. It also depends on if you need those funds initially to live on or not. Hopefully, if you're just starting out, then you have another form of income coming in from a job or a spouse or somewhere else where you can take those dollars. So I think once you have money coming in, if you have cash flow of, let's say, $1,000 a month that's coming in from your Amazon payouts, then you need to decide, okay, well, how much of that am I going to put back into inventory? And then how much of that cash flow can I put into automating something or outsourcing something so that I can spend my time figuring out what's the next big thing for my business, right? Because if you're packing inventory, that means you're taking time away from doing something else that ultimately could be yielding bigger, bigger results for me. Whether that's reaching out to wholesale brands, to resell their products, or whether that's doing higher level tasks like potential product sourcing, or whether it's figuring out, marketing strategies to how to grow the business. You're not going to be able to do those things if you're focusing on lower level tasks. So as soon as you have some cash flow coming in, you want to figure out, how do I best utilize this cash flow to, to be able to invest more and continue to invest in inventory, and then also outsource things, so I can figure out what's next thing in my business that's going to help me grow.
Awesome. Makes sense. So Andy, I'm going to give you a minute to think about, I'm going to ask you the question now and give you a minute to think about it. What's a software that you use in your private label Amazon business that you just could not do without, right? Maybe you could, but you really would not want to do without this one. So you kind of see this as a bare minimum to your business. And then if you can, try to think of one maybe that is really helpful. And now that you've grown to be $1 million seller, you use now, but if you were just starting off, you would maybe wait, right, to get to a higher level. So I'll let you think about that. Liran, I might ask you about this too now, if you have anything in mind that a software or a tool, and because we're talking about reducing costs, right? We're talking about software and tools are usually kind of those first layers of cost that a lot of us add to our business, besides actual product costs. And maybe if you need to think about it, we can talk about product costs first, because we do want to get into ways that you can reduce costs on the actual product side, right, when you're dealing with your manufacturer and getting things over. So Liran, I'll let you decide if you want to talk about that first, the software, or talk about how to reduce costs potentially when you're working with a manufacturer and you're trying to just get your first product going and in.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as software, I think there are some essential things that you want to have in business. Once you're realizing, okay, this is a real business and not just like a hobby anymore. So one thing, one of the first things when, after a year, after I guess my first year on Amazon, I was doing my own taxes and using like TurboTax and all that. And then I decided to hire an accountant. And one of the first things they did was, okay, you need QuickBooks so that we can hook up, your bank accounts and your credit card, and, your entire business to really manage it correctly from an accounting standpoint. So, I think they set me up on a QuickBooks online account. They had like a wholesale sort of account. It's $14 a month, right? To me, I saw that as a necessity for having my numbers, correct, and having like accounting set up correctly, right? So,
Liran, let me ask you, sorry to stop you, but I mean, when you do that, it allows you to every month kind of see where your progress is as far as your numbers, right? Because you have this set up and you have someone that's actually helping you with it. I think a lot of people go too long without setting something like this up, like you said, is an essential. And then, the year's done with, and they really don't know their numbers, right, until they kind of figure it all out. But the way that you have it set up now, you can kind of month to month see what your profit is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, along with that, I use a tool like Fetcher, for example, where I can enter in like all my cost of goods, and it pulls in all my Amazon fees that I'm paying. It pulls in my sponsored ads fees, and I can see my, my profit margins after those expenses. And then when my accountant does like a quarterly, profit and loss, I can see sort of the entire business with all the other fees that are, that are outside of just, Amazon fees and sponsored ads, and things like that. I can see, software fees, any other marketing that I'm doing outside of Amazon, any Facebook ads, right? All that spending, I can see that. So those kind of tools I consider to be essential if you, for running a business, right? Because you want to be able to understand your numbers. So I think any tool like that helps you get a better view of what your numbers are is important to look at early on, and track your expenses and track what's actually coming in. Because things can look really great, from a revenue standpoint, but then you want to actually understand, okay, well, what does my business look like after I spend money on sponsored ads? What does it look like after, I spend money on software, after I pay my accountant, after, I pay VAs or an assistant or everything else. So, I think that I would consider any software like that probably essential to get early on, and at the same time spending the money on getting set up properly. So when I started, I was a sole proprietor for, I don't know, first 6 months or so, and then I set up an LLC. In hindsight, I probably should have set that up earlier. But you know, when you're starting out, you don't know if it's going to be sort of a hobby or a real business, and you might not think of that. But would have been easier to get started with that, probably just right off the bat, and make things a lot cleaner.
Right. I like that recommendation because we didn't really plan this, but it really goes well with, you know, if you set this up the right way, like you just mentioned, it's honestly a low cost as far as software goes. And it's essential, right? Getting your numbers right. And what it allows you to do is every month, really, if you want to go through and kind of itemize what's going into your, you know, accounting practices, you can see if you're overspending on things like software and other, like your storage costs, right? Which we're going to talk about in a minute. So I like that because this kind of fits really well into that. This is kind of essential, allowing you to get into that. All right. So we're going to come back to you, Liran, in a minute to talk about on the product side of things. Andy, did I give you enough time to think of a software that you think you can either pick one that's essential or one that you would tell people, maybe something that people think is essential, but that you think they can wait on? I'll let you pick.
Sure. So, I mean, two that as a private label seller that I think you have to have, and one is Viral Launch extension. I believe is it $19.99 a month now?
I believe so. And if you go to amazingfreedom.com/viral, I think we have a $10 off the first month, but okay. I believe $20 a month is the cost.
All right. So very low cost. If you're a private label seller, you're going to want to get that because it's going to save you a ton of time as you research potential private label products. You know, we always say that's where the money's made, right? If you can learn the skill of sourcing, you know, good products, that's what's going to help you be able to scale up your business quickly. So I would definitely get that one. If you're looking for one to help you manage your numbers, like Liran just talked about, I use Inventory Lab. It's also a listing software, so it'll help you list if you want to list through that instead of Seller Central. But I found Inventory Lab to be really good to help me get a gauge on what my larger numbers are. Maybe you're not at the level yet where you need QuickBooks and you need an accountant. When you're just starting out, Inventory Lab is going to help you. So I have an accountant. He actually pulls from Inventory Lab as well as from my Amazon seller account. So it's kind of like a checks and balances. So it's helpful for him as well. So those are the two top ones that I think, you know, you really, as you begin to start out, and if you're making this a real business, you'd want to look at the Viral Launch extension and then as well as the Inventory Lab.
Awesome. And for a lot of our listeners that do other forms of selling, they're probably familiar with Inventory Lab because it's really more beneficial if you have lots of SKUs and it's easy to set up, right? Because it's designed just for Amazon. If you're just doing private label and you only have 1 or 2 SKUs, Inventory Lab is probably overkill. QuickBooks is actually probably the more efficient efficient strategy because Inventory Lab is a higher monthly cost. But if you're doing other forms of selling anyways, and you're getting the private label, I think it still makes sense to kind of continue that on. I use it as well. So awesome. So I think those are great tools, you know, and it really comes down to knowing your numbers, right? We didn't really talk about this beforehand. This is kind of impromptu, but I think it's good that the software you guys are talking about involves, looking at your costs and your profits and everything that's in there, because once you do that, you really can start analyzing all the other stuff like Viral Launch and like Splitly and other tools that we'll talk about, right? So Liran, let's talk about real quick manufacturing, right? And actually getting your product made, maybe for people who are going after their very first private label product and they're kind of on a budget, right? They only have maybe let's say $2,000 to $3,000 to work with starting capital, which is, you know, kind of towards the minimum of what we recommend people start with when they're getting into private label. Do you have any recommendations when they are looking for a product, when they are talking to a manufacturer, when they're trying to decide, maybe the manufacturer has 2 versions, one that's a cheaper, lower quality version and a higher quality version? What's kind of your recommendation for someone? Because I think this is a real strategy. I know it was for me when I first started off. I kind of skimped on some of the quality for my products because I didn't want to spend as much. So what would be your recommendation for where is it worth cutting costs and where is it worth kind of paying it and maximize your profit by not cutting costs?
Right. Absolutely. So I think you definitely want to get the best quality that you can. You know, it doesn't mean that, you know, your product has to be expensive, but it means that you really should focus on quality, because you know, Amazon's ecosystem is all based on reviews, and if you start getting some negative reviews, you're going to actually end up probably losing money on the product, because you're going to have a difficult time selling it. You're either going to have to lower your price or liquidate it, or you know, try to get out of the product if you're going to have quality issues. Now, it doesn't mean, you know, that there aren't good, like you know, sort of medium quality products on Amazon versus like premium quality. You can have both, but the product needs to be able to work properly and needs to meet people's expectations for the price that they're paying, you know. So if I buy, you know, a Kia, I'm not going to expect it to perform and go to 0 to 60 the way a Porsche might, but I'm still going to expect a certain level of performance. So you kind of want to meet customers to, you know, with where they expect to get for a product. So I wouldn't skimp on quality. I think it's one of the biggest areas of you know, trouble that sellers get into is when they have quality issues on a product, either by not doing inspections. So that's another place where I really wouldn't skimp. I think it's worth paying $100, $200 to get an inspection done on your products, and get, you know, a good quality product, because ultimately that's a place you're going to spend money, but it's going to reduce, you know, it's going to save you money in the long run.
Liran, well, let's talk about this. Shipping, when it comes to your first private label product, is there a way that you can reduce your costs by doing efficient shipping from China?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one of the mistakes that I made early on was, you know, I wasn't familiar with shipping by boat, and so it was very easy to just have the manufacturer ship by like FedEx or DHL, but it was costing me a lot more money until I started importing by boat. So, you know, I think it's okay if, like, on a first shipment, you kind of want to get the product in and, you know, test it, and you might be willing to pay more and not have as good margins if you ship it by air, if it's even possible for your product. But, you know, and you want to make sure that your second, third, the rest of your shipments after are by boat, and that you are importing enough where you're not stuck in a situation where you need product fast because you're going to run out of stock, and now you're going to end up paying a lot more to ship it by air. You know, so yeah, so I think shipping by boat, and then ultimately, if you're getting, you know, if the product is doing well, or you're getting multiple SKUs from that supplier, if you can consolidate shipments where you're now shipping a container, you know, a 20-foot container or a 40-foot container, that's going to cut down your costs even more. So, for example, I'm going to start sending some products to the UK, and it's going to be my first time shipping products there. So I don't want to ship a container full of one product, but I'm going to take, you know, multiple products that I buy from one supplier and put that into either a 20-foot or a 40-foot container, so I can minimize my shipping costs, but not necessarily send too much of just one product over there, because I don't know what the sales are going to be like yet. So yeah, there's definitely ways to one, go from air shipping to boat shipping, and then once you get into boat shipping, you really want to start seeing if there's ways that you can ship in containers, because it's a significant amount of savings.
Awesome. So when you're just starting off, quality is definitely not the area where you want to try to cut corners. And so really what it comes down to is you're probably going to have to try to get a lower minimum order quantity. Something we share with our course members a lot is different strategies for trying to get lower quantities. We're not going to talk about it a lot right now, but, you know, you might just say for your first shipment, you really need to do almost like a test order, right? Of, let's say 200, 300, 500 units, whatever it ends up being, and that you can afford, to make sure that your customers are confident with the quality of the product. And then on your next shipment, you'll plan to do a larger order, right? And you might have to do a number of back and forths with your supplier through chat, but a lot of times they'll eventually, it might take a couple of days and a couple of chats, but a lot of times they'll eventually come down to meet you on that lower MOQ. And again, that's because if you're trying to start with a lower capital amount, you're trying to kind of bootstrap and get in with a lower amount, that might be the way to do it. Andy, let's real quick talk about, and then we're going to get into some strategies, Liran, that I think you have for maximizing profits, actually, kind of on not the reducing cost time, but trying to maximize the profits. Andy, let's talk about, you recently got a warehouse, right? Let's talk about the difference of using Amazon storage versus a third party versus your own warehouse. How can you reduce costs, and how does that all kind of fit together in your head, and what level of seller needs to be thinking about this?
Sure. So if you're just starting out, I would probably say even if you're selling less than $1 million a year, you probably don't need a warehouse. Now, if you have access, to a very reasonably priced place, then, it's always more convenient. When you're just starting out, a lot of Amazon sellers, myself included, we started out working in our home. I know the three of us, that's how we started working, out of our garage and in our basement. But as you grow, you tend to run out of space pretty quickly. And so, once you get to a certain level where it's not manageable anymore in your home, then, you can do a couple of things. One is you can start using a third-party warehouse, and that's generally what most people scale to. That's what I did. I started using actually 2 or 3 third-party warehouses where I would have my goods shipped to them. I would have them store them and then have them send them in. And so obviously their storage is a little less than what it would be if I just sent it all straight into Amazon. And then I had some things that needed to be bundled prior to being sent in. So they were able to do that for me as well. But those fees start to add up, right, as your inventory level starts to go up. And so I reached a point where it was going to be beneficial for me to be able to acquire a local warehouse and to be able to have all of my inventory shipped and stored right at my local warehouse. Now, I'm the one that's prepping it. That's the only downside. Prior to, using those third-party warehouses, I was able to outsource all that prepping, which again is another decision that you have to make. But for me, the financial benefit of being able to store my products, and some of them are oversized, in my warehouse is going to greatly reduce, right, what my storage fees are. And then also right now, what my fulfillment is, because I'm doing it. Long-term goal is I want to be able to hire somebody full-time that's going to run that warehouse, as well as I want it to be a small prep and pack center for other private label Amazon sellers. So that way I'll actually be able to recoup some of my fees that I'm paying for the warehouse. Now, you don't need to worry about a warehouse, again, if you're just starting out, or maybe you're only selling $10,000 or $15,000 a month. I personally, would say you don't want to worry about that until you hit $1 million. And even then, you may not want to. Liran still utilizes, and he does it very well, third-party warehouses. And there are a number of very large Amazon sellers. They don't want anything to do with owning a warehouse. They'd much rather outsource that. And so, it definitely is more hands-off doing it that way. But for me, and here's the thing, Amazon storage fees are just going to continue to go up. I actually toured an Amazon warehouse about a year ago, and no kidding, we could barely walk in that warehouse because there were so many products in the aisles. It was really overflowing with products. And so Amazon knows that. And so they're really trying to be careful that you don't send in products that aren't going to sell. But along with that, they're going to continue to raise their fees. So I think it's going to be strategically for me, it's going to, save me money in the long run by owning my own warehouse and being able to store inventory there.
Awesome. That makes sense. And, it really depends on the level of inventory that you're moving. Like you mentioned, in your case, the warehouse is actually going to save you money this year, where for other people, if they're not moving as much inventory, then having that warehouse space, and it depends where you live, right? I know, Andy, in your case, you can get warehouse space very, very cheap near you, where someone that's living maybe out on the West Coast, right, is probably not going to be able to get warehouse space for nearly as affordable of a rate. So it does depend on a couple different factors, but in your case, it's going to save you money. In other people's case, just using a third-party prep center or Amazon storage until you hit a certain level is going to make the most sense. Liran, let's finish off today talking about maximizing your profits. The first way, maybe talk about maximizing by not going out of stock, some of your strategies that you've used, and then maybe some pricing and anything else that you want to throw in there that you feel like has helped you to maximize your profits and things that you're going to look to maximize this year as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that has, that has hurt me in terms of being able to maximize profits has been going out of stock. Now, sometimes there isn't all that much you could do in terms of going out of stock. You may have a new product that you're launching, you bring in 500 units, and they sell out a lot faster than what you expect. Or maybe you just brought in a product, then Chinese New Year hits, you can't order or replenish that product, and you've gone out of stock. Hopefully that only happens to you once with a product when it's new. And when you realize like what the sales potential is, you really want to be able to double down on that product and bring in a lot more inventory so that you never run out of stock on that product again. So I would say we probably all have, the 80-20 rule applies, right? We probably all have the top 20% of our SKUs or top 20% of our products that are driving 80% of our sales. And so on those products, you really want to double down, order a lot more inventory than you need. And that's why, using a third-party warehouse for storage, I think makes a lot of sense when you're going to do that instead of sending it all into Amazon. So, one of the mistakes I see people making is they order inventory for Q4, but they don't think about what happens after Q4. So it gets into December and 15th, and suddenly you're out of stock. You didn't order enough inventory where you would be good through, let's say, the middle of January until you can replenish of December. So you want to really take a look at what are my top 20% of products, and I never want to go out of those products. And if you do, then learn from that mistake, because there's a lot of costs to going out of stock on a product. So one, it's what did you lose out on potential sales? If you're out of stock, for a month or for a few weeks on a product that does, $20,000-$30,000 in revenue a month, you just lost all that revenue. But what else did you lose? Well, you may have lost some ranking. And when you come back into stock, you're going to need to do potentially some kind of launch or giveaway. You may need to up the amount of sponsored ads that you do to kind of get back in. So it's now not only cost you those days where you're out of stock, but it also costs you potentially whatever marketing you need to do to get it back up to the ranking position where it was beforehand. And then, what about losing customers that may have bought from you, who might buy from you again in the future, but now those customers have bought from your competition, right? And so you lose out potential sales in the future, especially if you have like a replenishable type of product or consumable product, right? Even more so. So there's tremendous amount of cost of being out of stock on your products.
Liran, real quick, how do you pair that with the flip side of it, though? Someone who's worried about ordering too many products and then possibly incurring long-term storage fees. So if you're just using Amazon warehouse, maybe you can go over, that's obviously a big area that you have to reduce costs, avoiding those long-term storage fees, right? So if you're using a third party, you don't have to worry about that, right? But how do you kind of deal with the flip side of that?
The flip side of that is that, you want to avoid the long-term storage fees. So if this is one of your top products, then hopefully it's not a product that you're going to incur long-term storage fees, because it's one of your faster movers, where, it is one of those things that 20% of your product that's driving 80% of your revenue. You wouldn't want to do this on every product where you just keep mass amounts of inventory for a product that's moving slowly. But, on your best sellers, on those products that are moving faster, ideally you would get inventory where you're sending inventory where it's not over 6 months of inventory into Amazon. If you're going to run across those issues, then you're going to need to find a way, a month leading up to those potential long-term storage fees to run a sale, run a coupon, run lightning deals, run promotions, so that you can avoid those fees. But ultimately, it does lead up to the fact that if you have a product like that, that's a good fast mover and you want to order massive amounts of inventory, then maybe you should use a third-party warehouse. So I have a product that was one of my best sellers, sold out in December. I just got it back in now. And I got 2,000 units into Amazon of that product. And I was out of stock for, like a month, over a month and a half, because it sold out in December. So I lost, significant amount of money for that. But I also have another 2,000 units that are on a boat right now before Chinese New Year, and that's going to a third-party warehouse. So, I would advise you to utilize either, like Andy's doing, he has his own warehouse space, or a third-party warehouse. And like you said, I think it all depends. I'm in New York City. If I wanted to get a warehouse here, it would be, it wouldn't make financial sense for me to do that. So I'm using a third-party warehouse in California. And I'm saving on those storage costs. It is also an oversized product, so I'm saving a significant amount of money, but I'm keeping more product in the US. One of the things that you can do, if you are facing, you don't have a third-party warehouse and you do want to not send in too much inventory into Amazon, is you could always have the product produced in China, and possibly either your supplier or actually stored in a warehouse in China, but maybe your supplier can just keep it for you. And then, you could ship it, maybe like a month ahead of going out of stock on Amazon, but the product is at least made. So you're saving some time there. But, with your top products, you should only learn that mistake one time as far as going out of stock, and then really strive not to go out of stock on those products. I have other products that if I went out of stock on, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because those are not the ones I'm doubling down on that have, really good sales velocity.
Awesome. Makes sense. So why don't you kind of finish off some of the maximizing profits, talking about your pricing strategy and, one of the tools or multiple that you use to help with that. And that'll help give us another way to maximize profits, actually, that you used pretty well this past Q4, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, another area where you could be leaving money on the table is in your pricing strategy, because a lot of people that sell their own products, they kind of pick an arbitrary price based on competition, based on what margins they want to make, but they're not properly testing what customers are willing to pay, and what customers are willing to pay at different times of the year. So, if I have a product that's a great holiday gift or a great Valentine's gift, let's say like right now, I could probably sell that at a much higher cost now, as opposed to after Valentine's Day, right, when there isn't going to be as much demand for it. So I use a tool called Profit Peak from Splitly, where it automates my pricing based on velocity. And so in Q4, as my velocity increases, my prices increase also. I do give it a range of pricing. So I don't necessarily want to charge, 3x or 4x what I typically charge, because I also want to avoid negative reviews. But I give it a range, where I think the pricing is still good, still customers are getting value, but I am charging more when there's peak demand times. So using tools like that to automate your pricing, or just thinking about A/B testing. There's a lot of tools where you can A/B test your pricing, A/B testing your main images. Doing all those things can help you maximize your profit, because maybe your conversions are not as good on one image being your main image versus another image, for example. So you want to focus on those things that could be little tweaks that can really maximize your profits.
Awesome. That's huge. A lot of people, myself included, for most of my first private label products, kind of just guessed what I thought would be good, maybe base it off the competition. But once you start getting rolling and you're doing better than the competition, you don't really know what you should be doing, right? So that's good advice. And I want to wrap up saying another way that you kind of maybe not reduce costs, but maximize your profits is getting back money that's owed to you, right? So a lot of people know that if you use fulfillment by Amazon, which is awesome, that you can occasionally have products that get lost, damaged, destroyed, whatever, right? Over refunded, or customer concession, they call it, to Amazon, where they give the customer back more than they paid for it. And this is stuff that can eat into your profits, because you're losing inventory and you're not getting reimbursed for it and you don't even know it, right? So that's huge. You really want to look at your business reports. We did a Facebook Live, Andy and I did, just recently in the Amazing Freedom group. You can go and search for that there, where we talk about account management techniques. And a lot of those account management techniques really fit into reducing your costs that we talked about here today. You can also go to amzprofessional.com. That's a partner service of ours where we actually help sellers recover lost reimbursements. We've helped some sellers recover thousands and thousands of dollars in lost reimbursements that are owed to them, and then also do other things like remove negative seller feedback and look at negative product reviews and remove unfulfillable inventory, all that stuff that nobody really likes to deal with, but can really be eating into your profits and making sure that you're getting money that you could spend on additional inventory, right? So I think that's really important. Awesome. So I think that was some really good tips for reducing your costs and maximizing your profits. Guys, I want to really quickly talk about the giveaway that we're doing in the Amazing Freedom group from February 15th through the 25th, depending when you're listening or watching this. May or may not still be going on, but you're definitely want to go to amazingfreedom.com/Facebook if you're not in our group already. We're celebrating reaching 10,000 Facebook group members in the Amazing Freedom group, something I'm pretty proud of. I think that's pretty cool to get 10,000 members into there. Amazon sellers who are looking to grow their business. Maybe they do other forms of selling. They're looking to get into private label, or currently private label sellers looking to maximize their profits. And we really just have a really great core group of positive sellers in the Amazing Freedom group. So I'm pretty excited that we were able to reach 10,000 members. And what we're doing is we're giving away a really cool prize 10 days in a row straight. We have stuff like Magic Image Service, free AMZ Pro months, access to a couple awesome groups related to Amazon. We have some really good software like Helium 10 and Seller Tools and Seller Labs, who's giving away software packages, a couple of free months into those. So you're going to want to go to amazingfreedom.com/giveaway. If you're listening before all that is over, you can enter into the giveaway, or you can just go to the Amazing Freedom Facebook group and get access to that giveaway. There should be pictures in that as well. So I'm excited. Andy, Liran, you guys have done an awesome job, I think, of bringing content that has helped people find a good experience within the Amazing Freedom group. And hopefully you'll continue to subscribe to us, watch, listen, leave a comment. And that helps us to be able to know that we should keep making these videos, keep recording these podcasts, and helping you guys out. Thanks for listening. Make sure you go to amazingfreedom.com/YouTube or /podcast to get either or the video or the audio. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Amazon Seller Podcast. See you guys.